The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the enormous space. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward, his black uniform crisp and clean against the alien architecture that surrounded him. Behind him walked Ambassador Lisa Carter, carrying a leather briefcase that held Earth's hopes for the future. Their footsteps clicked against the polished stone floor. As they made their way toward the center of the chamber, the room was bigger than any building Morrison had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds could have formed up there, and the walls curved in impossible ways that hurt his eyes if he looked too long. Seats rose in tiers around them, filled with creatures that looked like they had stepped out of humanity's wildest dreams and nightmares. To his left sat the Zephyrian delegation. Their blue skin shimmered like water, and their forearms moved in graceful patterns as they whispered among themselves. Morrison had read that they considered themselves the artists of the galaxy, creators of beauty that humans could barely understand. Their technology was so advanced that they had stopped aging centuries ago. On his right, the crystalline forms of the Veltar caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. They were beings of pure thought, Morrison had been told, their consciousness housed in structures that looked like living diamonds. They communicated through vibrations that most species needed machines to hear. High above them all, in the seat of honor, sat Elder Counselor Thexrim of the Altarian Empire. His species looked almost human, except for the silver skin and the third eye that sat in the center of his forehead. The Altarians had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. Morrison reached the speaking platform and set his hands on the smooth surface. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times, but standing here now, surrounded by beings who had mastered space travel when humans were still learning to make fire, he felt very small. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Federation. I stand before you today to present humanity's formal request for full membership in this great assembly." A low murmur ran through the gathered delegates. Morrison could hear what sounded like laughter from the Zephyrian section, though with their alien voices it was hard to be sure. He continued anyway. "Earth has been in contact with galactic civilization for 5 years now. In that time, we have shown our commitment to peace and cooperation. We have honored every trade agreement, protected shipping lanes in our sector, and provided aid during the Proxima crisis." Morrison gestured to Carter, who stepped forward and opened her briefcase. Inside were data tablets containing everything humanity had to offer. Their agricultural techniques that could make barren worlds bloom. Their music and art that had already begun spreading through alien cultures. Their willingness to serve as peacekeepers in the galaxy's trouble spots. "We do not come before you empty-handed," Morrison said. "Earth offers unique contributions to the galactic community. Our farming methods have increased crop yields on 12 worlds by an average of 30%. Our cultural exchange programs have fostered understanding between species that had never communicated before. Our military forces have maintained stability in regions that others had written off as hopeless." The first open laugh came from the Zephyrian section. Delegate Vexcala stood, his forearms spreading wide in what Morrison recognized as a gesture of dismissal. "Honored humans," Vexcala said, his voice like singing water, "your enthusiasm is charming, but surely you understand the difference between primitive techniques and true advancement. Your agriculture relies on soil and weather patterns that we mastered millennia ago. Our artists create beauty that exists in 17 dimensions, while yours barely manages 3. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "With respect, Delegate Vexcala, effectiveness matters more than age. The worlds using our techniques are feeding their populations better than ever before." A crystalline voice rang out like breaking glass. The Veltar representative, Shexara, had activated her speaking unit. "Captain Morrison, your species measures success in such limited terms. Food production, military victories, territorial control? These are concerns of young civilizations. When you have existed for 50,000 years as we have, you understand that such things are temporary illusions." Carter stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. "Honored Delegate Jexara, we understand that the Veltar have achieved great wisdom through their long existence. But perhaps our youth brings a fresh perspective that could benefit the Council. Sometimes an outside view can solve problems that familiarity has made invisible." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Elder Counselor Thexrim slowly rose from his throne, his 3 eyes fixed on the human delegation, and Morrison felt like an insect under a microscope. "Humans," Thexrim said, his voice carrying the Wait of millennia, your passion is admirable. Your species shows promise, and in time, perhaps you will develop the wisdom necessary for true galactic citizenship. But that time has not yet come. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he kept his expression neutral. You speak of your contributions, Dexrim continued, but you fail to understand the responsibility that comes with council. Membership. Decisions made in this chamber affect trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. The Altarian Empire has guided galactic civilization through wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. The Zephyrians have created art that elevates the soul beyond physical existence. The Veltar have unlocked mysteries of consciousness that your science cannot even comprehend. The Elder Counselor paused, letting his words sink in. What have humans accomplished? You have existed as a technological species for barely 2 centuries. Your fastest ships take months to cross distances that others traverse in days. Your weapons are projectile-based curiosities that belong in a museum. Your lifespan is so brief that you cannot possibly understand the long-term consequences of galactic policy. Laughter began again, starting from the Altarian section and spreading through the chamber like a wave. Morrison heard delegate after delegate adding their voice to the mockery. The Centauran representative made a comment about ambitious mammals that drew particularly loud amusement. Perhaps, Dexrim said, raising his hand for silence, humans would be better served by accepting protectorate status. The Council could provide guidance as your species matures. In a few centuries, when you have proven your stability and wisdom, we might reconsider full membership. Morrison looked around the chamber at the laughing faces, the dismissive gestures, the casual contempt. These beings saw humanity as children playing at being adults. They offered protection and guidance the way one might offer to train a pet. He had expected this, if he was honest. Earth's leaders had prepared him for rejection. But they had hoped for respectful rejection, perhaps with suggestions for future improvement. Instead, he was being offered a participation trophy and a pat on the head. Morrison straightened his shoulders and walked to where Carter stood. He took the data tablets from her hands and placed them carefully back in the briefcase. The chamber gradually fell quiet as delegates realized he was packing up. Thank you, Elder Counselor Dexrim, Morrison said, his voice perfectly calm. Thank you all for your time and consideration. Earth appreciates the Council's offer of protectorate status, but we must respectfully decline. He closed the briefcase with a soft click that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Humanity will continue to develop on its own path. We wish the Council success in all its endeavors. Morrison turned to Carter and nodded. Together, they walked toward the chamber doors, their footsteps echoing in the quiet space. Behind them, confused murmurs began to rise. This was not how petitioning species typically responded to rejection. Usually there were pleas, arguments, desperate offers of tribute or service. The humans were simply leaving Dot as the massive doors closed behind them, Morrison heard Elder Counselor. Dexrim's voice one last time. The humans will be back. They always come back. Walking through the corridors of the Council station, Morrison and Carter said nothing. Around them, alien diplomats and staff watched with curiosity. Word was already spreading about the strange humans who had walked away. From an offer of protection, it would be the last time any of them saw humans in these halls for a very long time. Admiral Patricia Cole sat behind her desk in the Pentagon's newest wing, reading the report that had arrived from the Galactic Council just hours ago. The words on the screen matched exactly what Captain Morrison had told her during their encrypted communication, but seeing it in official council language made it feel more real and more insulting. She set the tablet down and looked out her window at the bustling streets of Washington. People walked to work, drove their cars, lived their normal lives without knowing that their entire species had just been rejected by the galaxy's most powerful organization. The council had offered them a place at the children's table, and Morrison had walked away. Cole picked up her secure phone and dialed the first number on her list. General Hayes, this is Admiral Cole. Operation Quiet Dawn is now active. Begin Phase 1 immediately. Within 6 hours, every human ship in galactic space received the same coded message. Captain Tony Brooks was patrolling the outer rim when his communication officer handed him the decoded order. He read it twice, then looked out at the vast emptiness between star systems where pirates and raiders had been growing bolder each month. Helm, set course for Earth, Brooks said quietly. Best possible speed. Sir, what about the convoy routes? The Centauran merchants are expecting our patrol schedule. Brooks folded the message and put it in his pocket. The Centaurans will have to make other arrangements. We're going home. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of human vessels. The patrol ships that had been protecting trade routes for 3 years simply vanished overnight. They left behind only automated beacons that broadcast a polite message, thanking other species for their cooperation and wishing them safe travels on the agricultural world of Kepler 442b. Commander Susan Hayes was in the middle of explaining soil rotation techniques to a group of alien farmers when her communicator chimed. She read the message, then looked up at the expectant faces around her. "I'm sorry," she said, gathering her equipment. "I've been recalled to Earth. There are detailed manuals in your computer systems that explain everything we've covered." The lead farmer, a tall creature with green skin and too many eyes, stepped forward. "Commander Hayes, the planting season begins next week. We need your guidance for the new fields." Hayes shouldered her pack and headed for the landing pad where her shuttle waited. "The manuals are very complete. I'm sure you'll do fine." She didn't mention that the soil analysis programs and rotation schedules were locked behind human encryption codes that would stop working in 72 hours. The aliens would figure that out soon enough. Dr. Kevin Walsh was in the middle of a breakthrough when the message arrived. For 6 months, he had been working with a team of Veltar scientists on Station Theta, trying to understand how their crystalline consciousness interacted with biological neural networks. The research could have led to medical advances that would benefit every species in the galaxy. Walsh looked around the laboratory at his alien colleagues, beings who had been working on this project for decades before he arrived. They respected his work even if they didn't always understand his methods. He had grown to consider them friends. "I have to return to Earth," he told them simply. "Personal emergency." The lead Veltar scientist, Jekmar, tilted her crystalline head in what Walsh had learned was confusion. "Dr. Walsh, we are so close to understanding the consciousness bridge. Your intuitive leaps have been essential to our progress." Walsh was already packing his personal equipment. "You have all my notes and research data. I'm sure the project will continue successfully." What he didn't tell them was that his intuitive leaps came from a way of thinking that was purely human. The Veltar could analyze data perfectly, but they couldn't make the creative connections that led to breakthrough moments. Without Walsh, their project would stall within weeks. On the diplomatic front, the changes were more subtle but just as significant. Ambassador Maria Gonzalez had been the human representative to the Centauri trade hub for 2 years. She attended every important function, negotiated deals that benefited both human and alien interests, and had built relationships with representatives from dozens of species. When Counselor Vexanala's aide called to invite her to the monthly diplomatic reception, Gonzalez politely declined. "I appreciate the invitation," she said, "but I won't be able to attend. Humanity is reassessing its galactic priorities." The aide, a young Zephyrian who had always been friendly to humans, sounded confused. "Ambassador, this is the annual trade summit. All the major agreements are negotiated at this event." "I understand," Gonzalez replied. "Please give my regards to all attendees." She hung up and began drafting messages to her various contacts. Each one was polite and professional, explaining that Earth was focusing on internal development and would not be renewing its current trade agreements when they expired. She thanked everyone for their cooperation and wished them success in their future endeavors. The most dramatic change happened along the shipping lanes where human patrol fleets had been maintaining security. The Outer Rim had always been dangerous, with pirates and raiders hiding in asteroid fields and attacking merchant vessels. Most species avoided the area entirely, but humans had volunteered to patrol it 3 years ago. Captain Brooks and his squadron had reduced piracy in their sector by 70%. They didn't have the most advanced weapons or the fastest ships, but they had something that made them uniquely effective at anti-piracy work. They thought like criminals, while alien security forces followed logical patrol patterns and responded predictably to threats. Humans were chaotic and unpredictable. They set traps, used misdirection, and employed tactics that confused both pirates and their own allies. It worked because human criminals had taught human law enforcement to think creatively. When the human patrols disappeared, the pirates noticed immediately. Within days, raider attacks increased dramatically. The shipping companies that had grown dependent on human protection found themselves scrambling to hire expensive private security firms. Back on Earth, Admiral Cole received reports from all sectors. Every human in galactic space was coming home, and they were bringing with them detailed intelligence about how the galaxy really worked. The various species liked to present themselves as advanced and self-sufficient, but humans had been quietly filling gaps that no one wanted to acknowledge. Dr. Walsh's research had been advancing medical science faster than any project in the past century. Commander Hayes's agricultural techniques were feeding billions of beings on dozens of worlds. Captain Brooks and his fellow Patrol commanders had been keeping the shipping lanes safe for everyone. The humans had not been junior partners or grateful recipients of alien wisdom. They had been essential contributors whose work made galactic civilization function better. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was about to learn exactly how much they had been contributing. Cole picked up her phone again and dialed another number. Dr. Chun, this is Admiral Cole. How is the new research facility coming along? Ahead of schedule, Admiral. We'll be completely self-sufficient within 6 months. Excellent. And the agricultural stations? Already producing enough food for our current population with room for significant expansion. Cole smiled for the first time since reading Morrison's report. The humans were going home, but they weren't hiding. They were building something better, something that belonged entirely to them. The galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs? 3 months after the last human ship had disappeared from galactic space, Counselor Vexanala stood in his office looking at reports that made no sense. The numbers on his screen showed shipping costs in the Outer Rim had increased by 400%. Insurance companies were refusing to cover cargo vessels traveling through sectors that had been perfectly safe just months before. The first major incident had happened 6 weeks after the human withdrawal. A Centauran merchant convoy carrying rare minerals had been attacked near the Vega system. The pirates had taken everything and left the crews stranded on a dead moon. By the time rescue ships arrived, 12 beings had died from exposure. Vexanala had immediately contacted the Altarian military command, expecting them to dispatch patrol ships to the area. The response had been frustrating. Admiral Zaxkar explained that his forces were already stretched thin covering their normal responsibilities. Patrolling the Outer Rim would require reassigning ships from other critical duties. The humans were handling that sector, the Admiral had said. We assumed they would continue their patrols even after the Council vote. But the humans had not continued anything. They had simply vanished, taking with them all their strange methods and unpredictable tactics that had somehow made the most dangerous parts of the galaxy safe for ordinary merchants. Vexanala switched to another report. This one from Kepler 442b, the agricultural world was facing its worst crisis in decades. Without Commander Hayes and her human techniques, the alien farmers had tried to continue using the methods she had taught them. But the programs had stopped working, and no one understood why. The planet's administrator, a competent Rejection named Devourer, had sent increasingly desperate messages. The crop yields were dropping every week. The soil rotation schedules that Hayes had created were not working without constant human supervision. Entire fields were dying, and billions of beings across multiple worlds depended on Kepler 442b for food. We need human expertise, Devourer had written in his latest report. Our agricultural scientists cannot replicate their methods. There appears to be some element of human intuition that our analysis cannot capture. Vexanala had forwarded that report to the Veltar Scientific Council, hoping their advanced minds could solve the problem. The response had been immediate and embarrassing. The Veltar admitted that they had studied human agricultural data for months, without understanding how humans achieve such consistent results. Human farming techniques appear to rely on pattern recognition that operates below the level of conscious thought, their report stated. While we can replicate their procedures exactly, we cannot duplicate their ability to sense when modifications are needed. This intuitive element seems to be essential to their success. The third report on Vexanala's desk came from Station Theta, where Dr. Walsh had been working on consciousness research. The project had completely stalled without him. The Veltar scientists had all of Walsh's notes and data, but they could not continue his work. Dr. Jekmar had been forced to admit that Walsh's contributions went far beyond simple data collection. His unscientific hunches had led to breakthroughs that pure logic could not achieve. Without his creative leaps and willingness to test impossible theories, the research had ground to a halt. We request Dr. Walsh's immediate return, Jekmar had written. This research could benefit every conscious species in the galaxy. Surely Earth would not withhold such knowledge over a political disagreement. But Earth was not responding to any requests for individual human experts to return. All communications were politely acknowledged and filed away without action. Humanity had made its choice and was sticking to it. The worst situation was developing in the contested regions, where human peacekeepers had been maintaining stability. Vexanala had reports of 3 separate conflicts that were rapidly spiraling out of control. The Proxima border dispute had erupted into open warfare. 2 minor species that had been arguing over mining rights for decades had finally started shooting at each other. Lieutenant Colonel Turner's peacekeeping force had been preventing exactly this scenario for 2 years, using a combination of diplomacy and subtle intimidation that kept both sides from escalating. Without the humans, The Altarian Empire had tried to step in, but their approach was different. Where Turner had been flexible and creative, the Altarians were rigid and formal. They followed established protocols that both sides had learned to manipulate. Within weeks, the situation had deteriorated beyond any hope of peaceful resolution. The second conflict was even worse. A trade war between the Centaurans and the Regellians had turned violent when Centauran merchants were attacked at a supposedly neutral trading post. Captain Martinez had been mediating disputes in that region for months, using his understanding of both cultures to prevent exactly this kind of incident. The Altarian diplomats who replaced him had tried to apply standard conflict resolution procedures, but they did not understand the cultural nuances that Martinez had spent years learning. Their well-intentioned efforts had instead made both sides angrier and more suspicious of each other. The third crisis was developing on the outer edge of Zephyrian space, where a refugee crisis had been building for months. Displaced beings from a dying star system needed temporary homes while permanent solutions were found. The humans had been coordinating relief efforts across multiple species, somehow getting natural enemies to work together for humanitarian purposes. Without human coordination, the relief effort had collapsed into chaos. Each species wanted to help, but they could not agree on methods or responsibilities. Thousands of refugees were stranded in temporary camps while their would-be rescuers argued over jurisdiction and procedures. Vexanala closed the reports and walked to his window. Outside, the council station continued its stately orbit around the galactic capital world. Ships came and went, carrying diplomats and trade representatives from across known space. Everything looked normal, but Vexanala could feel the cracks beginning to show. Elder Counselor Thexrim had called an emergency session for the next day. The Altarian Empire was facing pressure from multiple directions as they tried to fill the gaps left by human withdrawal. Their military was overextended, their diplomats were overwhelmed, and their scientists were struggling with problems that humans had been solving with apparent ease. Thexrim had been receiving increasingly urgent messages from sector commanders and planetary administrators. The same species that had laughed at human primitive methods were now desperately trying to replicate them. But something essential was missing, some element that made human solutions work where alien logic failed. Vexanala turned back to his desk and opened a new communication channel. He had decided to try reaching out to Earth directly, hoping that humanity might be willing to discuss terms for returning their experts to critical positions. The response came within hours. Ambassador Carter's face appeared on his screen, as calm and professional as ever. She listened politely to his request for Dr. Walsh's return to Station Theta, nodding at appropriate moments. "I appreciate the Council's recognition of Dr. Walsh's contributions," Carter said when Vexanala finished. "However, Earth is currently focused on internal development projects. Dr. Walsh is essential to our own research initiatives." Vexanala leaned forward. "Surely Earth understands the galactic importance of this research. We could offer substantial compensation for Dr. Walsh's services." Carter smiled politely. "Dr. Walsh is not for hire, Counselor. He is a citizen of Earth working on projects that serve Earth's interests. I'm sure the Veltar will eventually solve their research challenges using their own considerable abilities." The communication ended, leaving Vexanala staring at a blank screen. For the first time since the humans had left, he began to understand what they had really lost. It was not just human workers or human ships. It was a fundamentally different way of thinking that had been quietly making the galaxy a better place. Now, that way of thinking was gone, and no one knew how to replace it. 6 months after humanity's departure from galactic affairs, Admiral Zexkar of the Altarian Empire stood in his command center watching a disaster unfold in real time. The massive asteroid designated KX-7742 was heading directly toward Vega Prime, a heavily populated world home to 12 billion beings from 6 different species. The detection had come too late. By the time their deep space sensors identified the threat, they had only 18 hours before impact. 18 hours to coordinate the largest deflection mission in galactic history, involving fleets from 4 different species and technology that had never been tested on this scale, had commanded fleet operations for 3 centuries. He had fought in the Rigel Wars, coordinated relief efforts during the Great Plague, and supervised countless military exercises. But as he watched the tactical display showing ships struggling to reach their assigned positions, he found himself thinking about a human colonel who was not there. Colonel Steve Martinez had handled the Proxima asteroid crisis 2 years ago. A smaller rock, but the same basic problem: too little time, too many variables and ships that needed to work together despite using incompatible technology. Martinez had solved it in a way that made no sense to Altarian military doctrine but had worked perfectly. Admiral, The Centauran fleet is requesting position adjustments, reported his communications officer. They say their deflection array cannot achieve proper alignment with the Veltar ships in the current formation. Zexkar studied the tactical display. The Centaurans were correct. Their energy-based deflection system needed a clear field of fire, but the Veltar crystalline ships were blocking their optimal angle. Standard procedure would be to recalculate the entire formation, a process that would take hours they did not have. Move the Veltar ships to grid 77 Alpha, Zexkar ordered. Sir, that puts them outside optimal range for their gravity manipulators. Zexkar felt frustration building in his chest. Every solution created a new problem. The Zephyrian fleet was too far away to contribute effectively. The Rejection ships were fast enough to reach the target but lacked sufficient firepower. His own Altarian vessels had the most powerful weapons but needed time to charge their main batteries. Martinez would have found a way to make it work. The human had a talent for seeing possibilities that escaped more logical minds. Where Altarian training emphasized following proven procedures, Martinez had been willing to try completely untested combinations of tactics and technology. Admiral, incoming message from the Veltar commander, the communications officer announced. Commander Jexilla suggests repositioning her ships to provide gravitational anchoring for the Centauran energy beams. Zexkar blinked. That was exactly the kind of creative solution Martinez might have proposed. Put me through to Commander Jexilla. The crystalline face of the Veltar commander appeared on his screen. Admiral Zexkar, I have been reviewing the tactical logs from the Proxima incident. The human Colonel Martinez used a similar energy-gravity combination to redirect that asteroid. Perhaps we can adapt his methods. For the next 6 hours, Zexkar found himself coordinating a battle plan that borrowed heavily from human tactical innovations. The Centaurans would fire their deflection beams while the Veltar ships used their gravity manipulators to create an artificial anchor point. The Zephyrian fleet would provide precision targeting data while the Regellians used their speed to make last-minute position adjustments. It was chaotic, improvised, and completely outside standard military doctrine. It was also exactly the kind of solution that Martinez would have loved. The operation succeeded, but barely. The asteroid's trajectory shifted just enough to send it harmlessly past Vega Prime, but the cost had been enormous. 2 Centauran ships had been destroyed when their deflection arrays overloaded. A Veltar vessel had been damaged by gravitational stress beyond its design limits. The coordination problems had resulted in inefficiencies that made the mission far more dangerous than it needed to be. As Zexkar reviewed the after-action reports, he realized something that made his stomach feel cold. They had won, but they had needed to copy human methods to do it. Without Martinez's tactical innovations from the Proxima crisis, they would not have known how to combine different technologies in creative ways. The humans had not just been contributors to galactic civilization. They had been teachers showing other species new ways to think about old problems. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was struggling to remember the lessons they had learned. Dr. Helen Carter was having similar thoughts as she reviewed the research requests that arrived daily at her laboratory on Station Beta since Dr. Walsh's departure from Station Theta. Alien scientists from across the galaxy had been sending her increasingly desperate messages. The Consciousness Research Project had completely collapsed. The Veltar scientists had all of Walsh's data and notes, but they could not continue his work. Their logical minds could analyze information perfectly, but they could not make the intuitive leaps that led to breakthrough discoveries. Dr. Carter, read the latest message from Dr. Jekmar. We have spent 4 months trying to understand Dr. Walsh's approach to neural pattern analysis. His methods appear to violate several fundamental principles of scientific logic, yet they consistently produce accurate results. We require his immediate return to continue this vital research. Carter deleted the message without responding. She had received similar requests from agricultural specialists on Kepler 442b, military strategists throughout the Altarian Empire, and diplomatic corps from dozens of worlds. Everyone wanted their human experts back, but no one seemed to understand why they needed them. The truth was uncomfortable for species that prided themselves on being more advanced than humanity. Human intuition and creativity were not primitive traits that would be outgrown with sufficient technological development. They were valuable capabilities that complemented logic and analysis in ways that made both more effective. Back on the council station, Elder Counselor Thexram was learning the same lesson through increasingly urgent reports from across the galaxy. The Proxima border war had escalated beyond all control. The Centauran-Regellian trade conflict was threatening to drag in 6 neutral species. The refugee crisis in Zephyrian space had become a humanitarian disaster that was straining resources across multiple star systems. Every problem had the same underlying cause: the loss of human mediators who had somehow managed to get natural enemies working together. The humans had not been more advanced or more powerful than other species, but they had possessed something that proved irreplaceable. Vexrim activated his personal communication system and sent a message directly to Earth. It was not an official council communication but a private request from one leader to another. He asked for a meeting with whoever was now speaking for humanity, hoping to discuss terms for ending the current separation. The response came from Admiral Cole within hours. She was willing to meet, but only if Vexrim came to Earth personally. No negotiations through intermediaries, no diplomatic protocols, no council oversight. Just a private conversation between two military leaders who understood the reality of their situation. Vexrim agreed immediately. As his personal ship set course for the Sol system, he reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The humans had been rejected as too primitive for council membership. Now he was traveling to their homeworld to ask for their help. The galaxy had learned its lesson about underestimating humanity. The question now was whether it was too late to make things right. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal from galactic civilization, Elder Counselor Vexrim's flagship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. As he approached Earth, he could see the changes immediately. New orbital stations circled the blue planet, sleek and efficient designs that looked nothing like standard galactic architecture. Human ships moved between them in patterns that suggested massive construction projects and busy trade routes. The humans had not been hiding during their year of silence. They had been building. Vexrim's ship was met by a small escort of human vessels that guided him to a station orbiting Earth's moon. The design was elegant and functional, with none of the elaborate decorations that marked status in galactic society. Everything about it suggested a civilization that valued efficiency over display. Admiral Patricia Cole met him at the docking bay, wearing the same simple uniform that Captain Morrison had worn to the council chamber a year ago. She was not what Vexrim had expected. Where he had anticipated anger or wounded pride, he found calm professionalism and quiet confidence. Elder Counselor Vexrim, Cole said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Welcome to Luna Station. Admiral Morrison is waiting to speak with you. They walked through corridors filled with busy humans working on projects that Vexrim did not recognize. Through observation windows, he could see construction ships building something massive in the space between Earth and Mars. The scale of the work suggested that humanity had been planning for complete independence long before their council rejection. Morrison's office overlooked Earth itself, the planet hanging like a blue jewel against the star-filled darkness. The former captain had been promoted to admiral during the year of silence, and the additional rank seemed to fit him well. He stood as Vexrim entered, offering the same polite respect he had shown in the council chamber. Elder Counselor, Morrison said, gesturing to a chair that had been sized for Altarian physiology. Thank you for making the journey to our system. I understand the galaxy has been experiencing some difficulties. Vexrim settled into the chair, studying Morrison's face for signs of satisfaction or revenge. He found neither. The human seemed genuinely concerned about the galactic situation, despite having every reason to feel vindicated by recent events. Admiral Morrison, Vexrim began, I will be direct. The Council made an error in judgment regarding humanity's application for membership. Recent events have demonstrated that we underestimated your species' contributions to galactic stability. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. The asteroid crisis at Vega Prime, the collapsed research projects, the agricultural failures, the peacekeeping breakdowns, we've been monitoring the situation. Then you understand why I'm here, Vexrim said. The galaxy needs human expertise. Not as junior partners or protectorate subjects, but as equals. The Council is prepared to offer full membership with all associated rights and privileges. Morrison walked to the window and looked out at Earth. That's generous, Elder Counselor. But I have to ask, what's changed? 6 months ago, humanity was too primitive for Council consideration. Our technology was outdated, our methods were unscientific, our perspectives were limited. Are we suddenly more advanced? Vexrim felt uncomfortable under Morrison's steady gaze. We have gained a better understanding of humanity's unique capabilities. Your species brings valuable perspectives that complement our existing approaches. In other words, Morrison said quietly, you discovered that you needed us after all. Before Vexrim could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Both admirals turned to the communication panel as urgent messages flooded in from across the galaxy. The news was catastrophic. An unknown alien species had emerged from dark space and was systematically attacking outer colonies. The first reports came from the frontier regions, where human patrols had once operated. Entire star systems were going silent, their last transmissions describing ships unlike anything in galactic databases. The attackers seemed immune to standard weapons and employed tactics that defied conventional military analysis. Morrison activated the main display, showing real-time intelligence feeds from human monitoring stations scattered throughout the galaxy. The attackers moved in coordinated swarms, targeting infrastructure and population centers with surgical precision. Their technology appeared to be biological rather than mechanical, ships that looked more like living creatures than constructed vessels. We call them Devourers, Morrison said, reading from the intelligence reports. They consume entire ecosystems, apparently converting organic matter into additional ships and soldiers. Standard galactic weapons have minimal effect on their bio-armor. Vexrim watched the tactical displays with growing horror. The Altarian Empire's most powerful fleets were being destroyed by enemies that seemed to adapt to every strategy thrown at them. The Veltar's analytical approach was useless against foes that followed no logical patterns. The Zephyrian's artistic perspective provided no insight into creatures that created only destruction. How long have you known about this threat? Vexrim asked. Morrison turned from the display to face him directly. We detected the first scout ships 8 months ago, shortly after our withdrawal from galactic space. We've been studying them ever since, developing countermeasures and preparing defenses. And you said nothing to the Council? Morrison's expression remained neutral. The Council made it clear that humanity was too primitive to contribute to galactic security. We assumed you had the situation well in hand. Vexrim understood the implied criticism. While the galaxy's leaders had been dismissing human capabilities, the humans had been quietly preparing for a threat that no one else had even detected. Their year of silence had not been sulking or isolation, but focused preparation for exactly this kind of crisis. What do you need from us? Vexrim asked finally. Morrison smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Nothing, Elder Counselor. We're not asking the Council for anything. But we are willing to help if certain conditions are met. The terms Morrison outlined were not vengeful, but they were firm. Humanity would join the defense as equal partners, not as subordinates following galactic protocols. Human tactical innovations would be implemented without interference from traditional military doctrine. Most importantly, after the crisis was resolved, humanity would take its place in the galactic community as full members with voting rights and territorial sovereignty. We're not asking for special treatment, Morrison explained. We're asking for recognition that different species bring different strengths. The galaxy's diversity is its greatest asset, but only if that diversity is respected rather than suppressed. Vexrim found himself in the strange position of negotiating from weakness with a species he had dismissed as primitive just 1 year ago. But as reports continued arriving of galactic fleets being destroyed by the Devourers, he realized he had no choice. The Council will accept these terms, he said formally. Morrison nodded and activated his communication system. Within minutes, human fleets that had been hidden throughout the Sol system began emerging from concealment. They were unlike anything Vexrim had seen before, ships designed with organic curves that somehow reminded him of the Devourer vessels but clearly served defensive rather than destructive purposes. Admiral Cole will coordinate with your fleet. Commanders, Morrison said. Our ships are already moving to intercept the Devourer advance. We should be able to prevent them from reaching the core worlds, but this is going to be a long fight. As they prepared to depart for the front lines, Vexrim found himself reflecting on the past year's events. The Council had rejected humanity because they seemed too different, too unpredictable, too willing to break established rules. Now those same qualities were exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. The humans had not withdrawn from galactic civilization in anger or spite. They had withdrawn to prepare, knowing that their unique perspectives would eventually be needed. When the crisis came, they were ready to return not as supplicants seeking approval, but as partners offering salvation. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's ambitions. Now it would learn to respect their capabilities.